Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Donald Trump stunned the nation by becoming the 45th president of the United States. His victory over Hillary Clinton sent shockwaves around the world. But many who voted for Trump never thought they would. Steve Strang is the CEO of Charisma Media. Like many people of faith, Steve supported Trump only because Ted Cruz dropped out of the race. After he personally interviewed Trump last fall, Steve became part of a team of Christian leaders who backed the future president. In his book, God and Donald Trump, Steve shares the reasons why he got behind this unlikely candidate and explores the possibility of a divine intervention involved in his election.
Stephen Strang joins us now, and Stephen, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And thanks for the book, God and Donald Trump, which really spells out how what many people thought was impossible. I know for me, we were watching the election returns, and my wife just couldn't watch anymore, and so she said, I can't watch this because all the experts were saying Hillary was going to win. And you started to see the narrative on the news programs change, and sort of bewilderment set in. And then you woke up the next day going, how did this happen? So answer the question I think a lot of people have. How did Trump appeal to evangelicals?
Well, first of all, let me say that the night you're talking about, I was up at the New York Hilton at the victory party because I believed that he was going to win. I wasn't sure. I was nervous. But I would not have gone up if I thought for sure he was going to lose, because I could see, well, first of all, it had been prophesied, and, you know, things had been shifting. There were all these sort of miraculous boosts to his campaign that who could explain them. And so there was kind of I felt an untold story. I've read several of the books on Trump. None of them go into this at all. They don't even mention how the evangelicals supported him. Mm-hmm. Back to your question. You know, part of the reason evangelicals, you know, Bible-believing, church-going Christians supported him was the alternative. You know, yeah. Hillary Clinton's...
Anybody but.
Right, anybody but. And, of course, we could say a lot about her policies and everything, and really there are other politicians that are equally left, or even more so in the case of Bernie Sanders. But with Hillary Clinton, she brought a level of corruption that we have never seen in politics. And I believe that God answered our prayers. In fact, I'll thank you for your endorsement, which I really appreciate. You said kind of what you just said right now, that if you woke up the day after the election and asked what happened. And I've used that as I've been interviewed, you know, with the book coming out. And I say Hillary Clinton wrote a book called What Happened, and my book answers the question. And I believe it's because God intervened and answered people's prayers with...
Do you think Hillary Clinton understands why she lost?
Of course she doesn't. I mean, I haven't read her book. I probably will. But she blames everybody in the world but herself. And
for me, one of the turning points, frankly, and I'm watching the debate, and partial birth abortion is brought up. Now, during her husband's presidency, he actually voted for, he signed into law a bill prohibiting partial birth abortion. But in the debate, she's full on, and she's saying, we'll never turn that away, it'll never stop. And I think Trump masterfully pushed her to that position.
And he also said that he would work to overturn Roe v. Wade, which, I mean, most politicians, even the ones that oppose abortion, they just sort of live with it. You know, it's the law of the land. But Donald Trump's going to make a difference. And I write about that in God and Donald Trump, that night, that debate. And that was a turning point. That was a tipping point. The ones I quoted were Hispanic pastors who, I had Hispanic pastors tell me that if Trump's immigration things went in and they sent all the illegals back, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, but if they did, they'd lose half of their church. So I'm wondering, half your church is illegal. But, you know, these were Christian people who get, you know, they're trying to assimilate the best as they can. But when Donald Trump, or when Hillary Clinton said that in the debate, they were texting each other and saying, that's just too much. I'm over it. And actually the book documents that the Hispanic community voted for Trump a lot more than people expected. Yeah. And that among Christians, Bible-believing Christians, you know, even though immigration was very important to them, and they, you know, they tend to kind of stick together on that, they backed Trump. And, you know, it was all these different things happening that actually gave him the, you know, the margin to defeat her.
Let's talk about the prophecies. And I think one of the great things about the book is you bring out the prophecies. And one that a lot of people probably don't know is that an American living in Italy, a deep man of prayer, prophesied that Trump would one day be president. When did that happen?
Well, he prophesied that Trump would turn America toward God.
Okay.
And it happened in the 1980s. And he told an American medical student studying in Italy, they, you know, I guess he was like a mentor or something, they'd become friends. He told him that God was going to raise up an American businessman named Donald Trump to turn America to God. And the doctor said, "You're kidding. He's a New York playboy." And the man said, "No, I know it's going to happen, and I even put his name on a brick." And they brick up St. Peter's Gate or something like that at the Vatican. I don't understand all this stuff. But the man devoted his life to prayer, went to Mass every day, lived in Italy for about 30 years. And he came home in 2008 and died the following year. So when Trump ran for president, this medical student, now a doctor, a prominent doctor in Boston, told his priest about it. Said, "You wouldn't believe what this man told me." In fact, he had told his priest to go visit the man in Italy the next time he was there, and he did. So this priest remembered the man and so forth, and the priest did a video, and it went viral. That's how I found out about it, and I interviewed all the people involved. You know, it really comes down to believing this doctor, you know, but why would he make that up? And my feeling is that God speaks to people today, and maybe in a way that we don't expect and maybe don't even understand.
Well, how do you think Trump is doing on that, turning America back to God? Here we're almost a year into his term, and how would you grade him at this point?
Well, that's a good question. And the priest, whose name is Capoverde, from Rhode Island, told me that Trump turned America toward God when he beat Hillary Clinton. That stopped this extreme leftward drift that would have happened. And then, of course, he appointed Neil Gorsuch. He has done executive orders about abortion, and about the Johnson Amendment, which kind of muzzles pastors. He says he's going to overturn it. So those are the kinds of things where I think he's shifting it. Now, a politician he's not pastor in chief, but he's got a lot of power and a lot of authority, and he can kind of shift the nation.
Well, I think that you're onto something with this Johnson Amendment. If we can get that repealed, then you will see a turning, because now churches will have a voice in the political process, which they had. I mean, back in the American Revolution, it was "No king but Jesus" was the common sermon in the pulpits across America. And it's like pastors are afraid now to even talk about politics and matters of conscience. What do you think it's going to take to actually make that happen, to say the Johnson Amendment should never have been part of the IRS law?
Well, it was put into the law by Lyndon Baines Johnson, who is a U.S. Senator. You probably know the story. And the interesting thing is, we've written about this before, and it's been an issue. I've never heard of any politician even talk about it, let alone say he's going to repeal it. And the story of how that happened is, I find interesting. He was with a group of pastors. They were praying for him. They were talking. And then he just asked them for their support. And they all looked at the floor. And he says, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, we can't support you." "Well, what do you mean?" He'd never heard of the Johnson Amendment. They explained it to him, and he said, "That's wrong. That needs to change." I mean, just like that, he seemed to get it. Now, the interesting thing is...
Well, he gets the strategic position of it, and he gets how it silenced the church in politics, that you can't be the conscience of the nation anymore.
However, it's a little bit of a bugaboo since 1954, when it went into effect. Only one church has lost their nonprofit status over that. But people are afraid, so it's a muzzle.
But it's the chilling of political speech. It's the threat of an IRS investigation.
And sadly, a lot of pastors hide behind that. You know, they're timid anyway, and this gives them an easy out. They don't have to deal with these issues. And that's part, I believe personally, that that's part of what's wrong with our country, is the church has withdrawn and withdrawn and withdrawn, while the other side has become more and more inactive, and it seems the last few years that they've been winning.
Yeah, we need to be, and you can't retreat behind the church door. Either we're salt and light in our culture, or we get thrown out. Jesus was pretty specific with that. You know, when the salt loses its flavor, you throw it out.
You know, these issues in our country have been around for a long time, a long time. When I went to secular university in the 70s, it was very, very left-wing, anti-war era, the whole thing.
Still is.
Yeah, but except that it's a whole lot worse. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And Donald
Trump, Christians, we need to recognize that's still a minority.
You're right.
There is still a Christian voice in America and needs to be heard. Anyway, we can go on for this a long time, but they're giving me the wrap. If you want to know more, all you have to do is get the book, God and Donald Trump. It's available nationwide, and it's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back. We'll talk more.